it's a pyramid, right? And trust is at the bottom of that. If there is trust, then fighting is actually just searching for the best answer. So if you have a bunch of guys on a team who really trust each other, they're vulnerable, they're open. When they argue, they're just trying to figure out how to win. Nobody's thinking you're trying to break me down or you're trying to make me look bad or you're trying to manipulate me. And so like, I remember the years ago, the Warriors got in a fight. Draymond Green got in a fight with his teammates at halftime, and they came out and played really well, won the championship.
Here at Crane & Company, we love to get guests from all walks of life when it comes to sports. We have coaches, we have players, we have managers, people that are in the NIL business, and we're very excited to be joined by an author right now, but he's so much more than that, a guy that really understands, when we use the word teamwork, a word we use all the time, team management, and really understands the functions, and I'm going to get to that here in a second. Our friend Patrick Lencioni, Mr. Lynchoney. Got it right. I absolutely nailed it. Author, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, a very, very popular book. He goes around speaking, talk to the biggest of the biggest when it comes to people that run things and that have to take ownership and responsibilities of teamwork and team management. It's an honor to have you, my friend. We're excited to kind of pick your brain a little bit.
It's great to be here. I can't wait to talk about this. I work with a lot of companies, and when I get to talk about sports, because I do stuff in sports,
For sure.
It's a blast.
Definitely. And we know teams, they're not just, we're not talking about the Jets or Auburn or Alabama. I mean, you talk about corporations, companies, everything like that. There's so many team functions out there outside of the realm of sports, but obviously we want to curtail it and kind of thread the needle here from a sports standpoint. And look, you've talked to guys like Jim Harbaugh, you've been around the country, you were just at Auburn as we were talking about before we came on air. And I want to ask you, I know there's a ton of variables, there's a ton of factors when it comes down to team management, pushing in the right direction, trying to not to manage but not micromanage. If there's one thing though that you could pinpoint, that you would point to, maybe above all else, and maybe there's not, when it comes to managing a team or that component or being in charge, what is the most important?
It's building trust.
Yeah.
It's and among the leaders first. So like most of the work I've done in professional sports and is working with the team of coaches.
Yeah.
Because if the leaders don't trust each other, the kids on the field or the players on the field aren't going to do that. And that's true whether you're at an airline or a restaurant or a corporation of some kind or a church or a military. But if the coaches don't operate like a team, then everybody else is not going to either. So it's really building trust among the leaders.
Definitely. You got to practice what you preach too. And, it's one thing, I think you have different type of leaders, right? You have different type of personalities in all walks of life when it comes to managing people in general. What is the line between, look at somebody like Nick Saban in Alabama, a guy that talk about structure and organization. He knows everything that's going on. What is the level between micromanaging too much and managing just enough? Like, speaking about threading the needle, is there kind of a lesson there or kind of points to stick by to not make sure you're overreaching where you paralyze the people that are around you from doing what they do best, the reason you brought them in?
Yeah, you know what I'd say? First of all, I can't talk about that guy because my son goes to Auburn.
Hey, that's true. Smart man.
And if I can't drop a 4-letter word when I do that, then I just can't go there.
I love it.
But yeah, coaches and leaders, they have different styles. And that's one of the things I love when you look at the way Andy Reid runs a team and the way Mike Tomlin runs a team and Bill Belichick, it's totally different. And the key is, do they recognize what they're great at, recognize what they're not good at, and then surround themselves by people who can fill the gaps? So there's not just one way to do it. And that's true in college. That's true in running a company. That's true in running a church or a school. Everybody leads differently, but they have to be self-aware enough to bring in people that are good at what they're not good at.
Yeah.
And,
without a doubt. Like, knowing how to hire, right? I mean, we have some head coaches that, can't go up and draw inside zone, but they know how to hire an offensive coordinator that can come in and they're more of the CEO type. That's what I find fascinating about people that are in charge. There is more than one way to skin a cat, or as they say in a movie we were talking about recently, there's more than one way to spice up the gumbo.
Well, talking about movies, I always heard when I was directing, 90% of your job as a director is to cast right. So clearly that ideal goes, is cross industries there.
Fishermen too.
Pat, I want to ask you about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. You got lack of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, inability to hold each other accountable, and inattention to results. I want to focus on the fear of conflict for a second there, because certainly we've all played for coaches who could yell really great, and certainly we've been on teams where physical altercations and fights break out, and usually that's a sign of a bad team, a team that is struggling. Can you break down for us just how fear of conflict cracks your top 5 list?
Yeah, but first of all, let me just say this. If there is no trust, because if it's a pyramid, right, and trust is at the bottom of that, if there is trust, then fighting is actually just searching for the best answer. So if you have a bunch of guys on a team who really trust each other, they're vulnerable, they're open. When they argue, they're just trying to figure out how to win. Nobody's thinking you're trying to break me down, or you're trying to make me look bad, or you're trying to manipulate me. And so, I remember the years ago, the Warriors got in a fight. Draymond Green got in a fight with his teammates at halftime, and they came out and played really well, won, and then won the championship. That's not to say you're engineering for that, but there's some times where a team of coaches or a team of players have to engage in conflict. Now, I'd prefer it to happen at practice or in the team room rather than on the sideline. But if you don't have good conflict, then people aren't going to leave the team room or leave the practice or the huddle committed to doing what they're going to do. So if a receiver wants to be pissed off with his coach, go to practice and say, hey, you need to throw the ball to me more. And the coach can say, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. By the time the game comes, he's just going to go block his ass off because he knows he's in on the game plan. So conflict actually begets commitment, and people are all in. Whereas teams where they're not allowed to speak up, they stand on the sidelines and they complain, or they go in the game and they don't actually try. They don't block. So conflict is good if there's trust. But let me just tell you, in a sport, having conflict with your head coach, you probably are going to do that through your position coach first. If every player on the team feels like they can go to the head coach's office and make a play for why they should be doing something, that's probably not a good idea in a team like that.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. So when you go in to consult for an organization, what is your approach when you see a full team full of driven and capable people, but there's dysfunction at the top? I mean, is it possible to have a functional operation with dysfunction at the top? We see this a lot with NFL organizations and owners. There's new ownership over in Washington right now, and sometimes we cycle through GMs and cycle through players and coaches. But, is it possible to have that when there's dysfunction at the top?
And the answer is no. I mean, and in a league where you have 32 teams, somebody's going to win. So you could still be okay, but you're not going to come anywhere near maximizing your potential. And I like to use the example of Eric Spoelstra at the Miami Heat, who's turned out to be one of the great coaches in the league. And do you remember when LeBron James got there and they won the championship, and they're like, well, heck, he's just babysitting? I mean, do you remember? I probably said it at the time. I didn't know him at that point. And it's like, well, anybody could take all those players, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, and win the championship. That guy has been a great coach when he had tons of talent, when he had less talent, when he had different kinds of things. And he studies and tries to build teams among his coaches and throughout the organization and on the court. And that's how he called us when LeBron James got to work to go to play there. He said, I need to learn about building a team. And that's when he got my book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And to this day, every year he works with his organization using that.
Well, Pat, I want to talk about lack of commitment in the transfer portal. I feel like these things can go hand in hand. When is it really a showing of a lack of commitment, or is it a kid, doing what's right for himself? And as a coach, how do you really coach or manage, that kid when at the drop of a hat, if something goes bad, he can tuck his tail and run?
Yeah, you know what's going to happen in college sports, and I've heard you guys talking about this recently, and it is what it is. I mean, when they change the rules and NIL comes in and the transfer portal and all that stuff, it is what it is. And so they have to figure out how to make that work. But just like in any other sport, talent is not the only thing. And frankly, very often the most talented teams don't win. And what you're going to have happen in the next few years is they're going to get so used to this idea of basically free agency in the world of college sports, where a coach that knows how to build a culture is going to outperform. Remember the Yankees, how they used to always have so much talent because they could spend more money, and yet they didn't always win.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that in a lot of sports. Talent is critical, but the Patriots didn't win every year because they had the most talent. They won it for so long because they built a culture. And I loved it because a player would get a little too out over his skis and decide he wanted to go play somebody else, and the Patriots would let him go, and he'd never do as well on another team as he did for them. So I totally understand coaches being fascinated by acquiring talent in college sports, but it's what you do with that talent. And I'd much rather hire a kid who was going to work through difficulties and commit to being there than one that's going to say, well, I'll give it a shot. And by the third game, if I don't think I'm playing enough, I'm going to start looking around for other teams. So
Pat,
it's going to get more like pro sports.
Yeah, Pat, is there a place you've been? I know you've been everywhere. You've basically seen Egypt, the Taj Mahal, the whole nine. Is there a place have you been to speak that you were just so impressed about how it was ran from top to bottom?
Yeah. Well, I went to West Point years ago with my dad, God rest his soul. I got to speak there. And I was really impressed by the humility and the faith and the hard work of those kids. And I have to say, I was there at a time before some deployments, and some of those kids have passed because they went and fought for the nation. So West Point was crazy. At different times, I worked with Southwest Airlines for the last 22 years. And it's a crazy world in the airline industry right now, and they're all struggling. But that was an amazing culture. Humble, not the smartest. I mean, I'm not saying they're not smart. They are, but not smarter than their competitors. They didn't have as much money, but man, people loved working there, and it was a fantastic place. Chick-fil-A, I've had a chance to work with Chick-fil-A.
That makes
They had an amazing culture.
Yeah, if Chick-fil-A ran for president, I'd vote for him. At least the lines wouldn't be long. I do know that. Pat,
Exactly.
I do want to ask, something that we see and I'm not saying, you have to play sports to be good in business, but the parallel from corporations and companies and athletes, or at least somebody that's been in that team scenario or that team culture, do you see that same parallel kind of in the mixed worlds that you partake in? How much, I guess maybe not easier, but how much, smoother the transition is from sports to the business world when it comes to operating as a team and leadership-wise? Do you see that in what you do?
Absolutely. And it can be any sport that is team-oriented. We talk about the difference between a golf team and a basketball team. Mm-hmm. A golf team goes out and they play their round and they add up their scores. We call it a team, but it's pretty individual. But if you've played in a sport, and there's other activities in life, but sports are so pure in this, where you have to make trade-offs and sacrifice yourself for the good of the team. That's fantastic. Now, if you've played sports and you've had bad coaches who fed into ego and all those things, that could probably be a negative. But by and large, I see most people that do great in teamwork in organizations have at some level really understood the trade-offs between individual ego and the collective good of the team. So I think, and for me, I played sports and it's been invaluable. And the crappy teams I've been on with bad coaches have taught me about how not to be a leader as well.
Mm.
Yeah. And, another thing, Pat, that and we hear the word culture. We throw it around a lot. And we talk about on this show the three pillars of building a consistent winner, just to use college football, for example, is obviously recruiting, development, and culture. And I think Blaine brought up a great point with the transfer portal with the players. But I think, too, with the universities and the entities, it's now such an arms race to the top with the crazy amount of money that's spent on coaching contracts, resources, facilities, now NIL. You look at a place like Florida, for example, and a guy like Billy Napier taking over there. I think if they give him enough time, and I know time is of the essence, especially at a place like Florida, you look at the culture that we look at personnel, right? Obviously, Florida surface level had good personnel starting, but had no depth. You can bring in talented players, but it takes so much longer to build that culture. Can you just talk about how, not trying to, speed up building a good culture is really, really important, because you really only get one shot at building a good culture?
Yeah, I think that it's critical. I think that having the talent is permission to play. I mean, obviously, you don't have talent. You can build a great culture, but if it's that much lower than your competition, that much lower, you're not going to be able to compete. But talent is just permission to play. And I think a coach needs to know that they're going to get, probably in college sports, if you don't have 3 years and you can't see where they're headed, that's a problem. If a coach feels like I have to come in there in year 1 or year 2 and turn everything around, they're going to start making shortcuts, and they're going to start thinking it's all about X's and O's. You got to give somebody enough time. And you look at what Dabo Swinney has done in Clemson, and it's all culture. I mean, it is really amazing what he did there. And I hope that continues. I hope that alumni and boosters and athletic directors have the patience to build something over the long term. Because what happens if you don't, like I love in the NFL, I love the NFL draft. I think what I love about it is how much attention they give to technical things and not enough to character and attitude. But culture is built through drafting players that have a common attitude. And that's what the Patriots did. They just didn't take ego-driven, self-centered people that wouldn't do their jobs. And it works, but you've got to be patient. So that's a long answer to a short question, but yeah, patience is important. And I hope that stays in college football.
Yeah, well, I say patients aren't just for therapists and doctors.
You do say that. Pat, I want to ask you about your book, Death by Meeting, because we get people in our live chat all the time saying, sorry, guys, I have to go to another pointless meeting. I've worked with a lot of people in life that the only thing they brought to the table was their work ethic, which is a great start. That's better than nothing. That's better than not working at all. But a lot of times, those type of people, they'll schedule meetings just so that we can have a session. It may be inefficient, it may be unproductive, but their thought process is that it's better than nothing. I mean, are meetings killing us here?
They are, but the reason why is because they suck. Yeah. The problem isn't meetings, it's bad meetings. Because if you think about it, like sometimes I'll have a CEO say, hey, Pat, if I didn't have to go to meetings or manage people, I'd really like my job more. That would be like a quarterback saying, if I didn't have to go to practice or play in games, this would be a sweet gig.
For sure.
Or a teacher saying, if I didn't have to teach kids in class, or a surgeon, if I didn't have to operate on people. The thing is, if you're a leader, meetings are your playing field.
Yeah.
That's where you get people in a room and you figure things out and you make decisions. And meetings should be interesting, compelling, exhausting, stressful, and invigorating. And the problem is very few people go to meetings like that. And you know where I drew my knowledge about meetings is I was a screenwriter in a previous life when I got out of college. And I learned that a meeting and a movie are very similar. And the first 10 minutes of a movie is when you decide if you like it or not. Yeah. And if the first 10 minutes of a meeting suck, the meeting's going to be over. And now here's the other thing. Every great movie has conflict at its core, and every great meeting should too. And if there's nothing worth having conflict about, and there's no way to get people interested in the first 10 minutes, then you probably shouldn't be having that meeting. But most of the time, our meetings could be great, but we're too concerned about them starting on time, ending on time, and nobody getting upset. And that's the definition of boredom.
Yeah. Man, if anybody, as a former special teams coordinator, I could not agree with that more. Because special teams, off the rip, they're like, I'm not this in my position. I'd have to go in there. Half of it was stand up. Half of it was me getting pissed off. But at least it was getting some sort of emotion from, because you had to make it, I guess fun maybe not be the word, but it was invigorating, I think is a good way to put it.
Compelling.
Yes, compelling.
Boredom is the problem in meetings, and we've kind of come to accept it like corporate penance. Oh, well, I guess I have to sit here and watch the clock tick backward. Yeah. No. At the beginning of the meeting, a leader should say, listen, we're going to be here for the next hour, and if we don't make good decisions, our competitors are going to win. We're going to lose. Our people are going to lose credibility in us. So why don't we sit forward and get a little bit interested in this stuff? Yeah. And if you argue with one another because you care, then I'm going to reward you for that. And if you don't speak up, I don't know why you're at the table. Now that's a little bit more compelling than what did the minutes from last week's meeting say?
Yeah. That's why we play a game on here called Let's Look at Each Other and Let's Be Honest. That's why it's a lot of fun.
That's what I love about how you guys interact with each other. And then you have brothers there. That's great too. But I bet when you're planning your show, you don't just sit there and go, oh, okay, if you want to do that. You go, no, I think that would be boring. So let's not do it.
For sure. I mean, at the end of the day, it needs to be compelling, it needs to be interesting, and it needs to be genuine. And I think that's something that kind of translates across all fronts.
Nobody wants to go to a special teams meeting. Nobody.
Okay, well, they wanted to go to mine.
Ever.
No
one's ever got excited about.
They want you to make that kick at the end of the game, though, don't they?
That's exactly right. It's amazing.
When
we hit that 52-yarder to send the game against San Diego State in overtime, everybody was so thrilled to go to the next special teams meeting.
There you go.
But Patrick, man, we are thrilled to be able to talk to you, man. This has been a great meeting. Compelling, by the way. But man, tell everybody again, if they're looking to purchase one of the great books that you've written, man, it's fantastic stuff. And you don't have to be a leader right now. You can be working to be a leader. These are great tools to have to get ready for that chance.
Right. You can go to Table Group. That's the name of my company, the Table Group, tablegroup.com. And find the 5 dysfunctions of a team and everything else we do. We have one called the Ideal Team Player, which is what I use with a lot of teams I work with, how to find and acquire team players. And then we have a brand new thing out called the 6 Types of Working Genius, which is about helping you understand what your skills are, your God-given talents, and which ones they aren't. So workinggenius.com is a place you can go and take that assessment. So those are 2 ways to find us.
Well, this has been an absolute blast. Absolutely. We got to do this again sometime.
Let me know. I'd love to.
Definitely. Well, Patrick, we appreciate it, man. Thanks so much. Congrats on all the success, and enjoy going around, man. I know you're killing it out there.
All right. I'll keep watching you guys. It's fun. Keep it interesting.
Appreciate it, Pat.
Thank you, man.